What is up, Green Bay Packers fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Draft brought to you by the good people at Badger State Brewing. Had so much fun there this last weekend. I'm going to talk UDFAs today, everybody's favorite. And look, man, the Packers have an awesome history with undrafted free agents. They do. Sam Shields, Tremont Williams, Chris Barnes for a tick, but you can go on and on. And the almost all the pass rushers that they used across from Clay Matthews for so long, but guys like Geronimo Allison, really fun stories, even as like camp invites like Darius Shepard and look, not all of Alan Lazard, not all of them. In fact, most of them don't necessarily end up as happy stories, if you will. But there's been a tremendously long tradition of at least one guy making the team as well. And I'd be surprised if that didn't continue this year, although your odds are way down because there have been a lot of 2021, 23, 24 person, 17 person undrafted free agent classes. This Packers roster got heavy. And in fact, if you look at our list over at packerreport.com, I'm just confirming it's still 9 guys long. We're going to go with those 9 guys. Now, Ken Ingalls says it makes us 2 guys heavy. It might. I think there's a chance that one of the names that we got, although it's not all our own reporting either. A couple of these guys were broken by us, but plenty of them were not. And so we're going to go through this list of guys and understand that, maybe the third kicker got cut. Maybe they're planning on cutting Royce. They have a ton of edge guys, but with the news that Enikbare is maybe going to be ready, that position is way different, right? Because I think you feel pretty good about Brenton Cox and pretty not good about everybody else. If they even choose to keep Cox, he didn't make my initial 53-man prediction because I thought between Edgerrin Cooper's ability to rush, Quay Walker's ability to rush, and maybe a little bit of positional flexibility of Colby Wooden, even though he gained weight, and Carl Brooks, if I'm going to keep 9 defensive linemen, 5 of them are actually going to be from the defensive tackle room, and I would just roll with LVN, Preston, Gary, and Enikbare. Because like I said, I think Edgerrin Cooper can blitz off the edge. I think Quay can blitz off the edge. I think in a pinch, it's a lot easier for, although I think LVN could play a little 3-tech if you needed him to, but I think it's a lot easier for Brooks and Wooden to go play a little bit of defensive end than it would be to go the other way. That's it. That's all I mean by that. Anyway, diving into the UDFAs, the first one that we'll talk about is Michigan. I do think that it is Trent Jones, which is actually the name of the street that I live on here in wonderful North Dakota. But it's spelled Trente. And so don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if people call him Trente Jones. But he's a Packersy super Packer offensive lineman. I'm going to grab an RAS here. So, yeah, 8.02 RAS. Maybe not super Packersy on that end, but him being a shade under 6'4" and 305 is super Packersy. Him having gone to a big time school like Michigan is real Packers. He just did the John Runyon Jr. thing in round 6. So obviously, a guy who's not enormous, ran pretty well at 5.17. Vertical jump left something to be desired, but his broad jump was excellent. And the Packers really, really do like the broad jump. I did not rank Trent, so I'm going to go through Lance Zierlein's analysis here. Strength, loose limbed with outstanding movement talent. Explodes hips and hands into first contact, generates terrific lower body push, smooth climber. That's important for the Packers if they're going to play. I think they were about a 55% zone blocking team, so that climbing part is important. Crisp, sudden hands with his pass punch and possesses tremendous core power to stop rush plans. Weaknesses, below average size. We know that. Made just 13 starts during the collegiate career. The guys that they actually drafted made a zillion starts. So that's definitely, I call it the scratch and dent store. That's why you might be able to find Trent Jones in the scratch and dent store. Excitable off the snap, causing oversets and missed landmarks. Can get better at working hips and feet. And overreaction to rush moves leaves him open to counters. Let's dive in ever so quickly to the PFF stats. Specifically, let us just very quickly find his pass blocking, because keeping Jordan Love alive, let me tell you, is going to be important to what the Packers want to do. And he is good at it. He is very good at it. Pass blocking grades above 75 in all 3 seasons at Michigan. He allowed 3 sacks over the course of 3 years, with pass rushing efficiency numbers of 98.9 in 2023, 96.9 in 2022, and in 2021, Trent Jones did not allow anything, although that is just on 25 pass block snaps. That is it. In true pass sets, he has only given up 2 sacks in his college career. So a short, somewhat athletic, big-time program offensive lineman that doesn't give up anything in pass pro. You, Trent Jones, are a Green Bay Packer. All right. Next guy on this list, and I think, in my opinion, the second most likely human being to make the Green Bay Packers, and that is USF offensive lineman Donovan Jennings. Part of that has to do with the fact that they gave him a fat bag to join the team. I think $100,000 in guarantees. $100,000 in guarantees, which that is just not something the Green Bay Packers do. They are not a big time guarantees crew at all for undrafted free agents. Their sales pitch has always been more about their sales pitch has been more about the opportunities, showing you what Tremont did, showing what Sam Shields did, showing what Geronimo did, showing what Alan Lazard did. They'll show you the opportunities. I think quicker than they'll probably show you the money. And obviously, $100,000 signing bonus or $50,000 signing bonus, all that becomes very inconsequential when it's a difference of, did you just sign a, $500,000 league minimum deal, or are you working at UPS, hoping that the UFL calls? And I know that sounds mean and harsh, but that's the difference. 6'4", super Packersy, although maybe at guard. 6'4" and an eighth, 323, which is big for them. Again, maybe at guard. Ran like a crazy person. Short arms too at 33 inches flat. Ran like a crazy person. 5:02 40-yard dash. Really good 3-cone time and an acceptable short shuttle time for them, which is super important. I think there's a reason they gave him $100,000. I think you basically, I had this conversation with Jacob Morley. He's Yosh Nijman. Very different football players, but I mentioned Yosh at the end of that draft as their, whatever it was, 9th pick, or this is their 10th pick. Guys, Donovan Jennings is their 12th pick. Just treat it that way. I really would. I would treat Donovan Jennings as their 12th pick. Like, he's that likely to make the roster. I think he makes that much sense. I have him over Travis Glover just as a prospect, and not that honestly far off from where I rank Jacob Monk. In fact, while I keep saying that 100 times, let's make sure that I didn't rank him ahead of Jacob Monk, just so it's not both guys. And I didn't. Okay. I did rank him 3 spots ahead of where I ranked Oladapo. But anyway, I would just treat Donovan Jennings as their 12th pick. After that, NIU defensive tackle James Esther. Hey, that was another theory. I talked about yesterday. I walked you guys through how I arrived at Jordan Morgan as the only really highly ranked tackle that they're probably interested in. 2 other theories that I talked about for a lot of the draft that ended up being right were the what I called the Melton Heath line at wide receiver and the Colby Wooden line at defensive tackle. There was a lot of talk about, competition to the room, competition. Let's add competition to the room. And look, I think there's probably times at the draft or early, maybe not. It might have been times all over where they were looking at the defensive tackle room, times in the draft where they were looking at the wide receiver room potentially. But ultimately, the theory was that if you weren't going to take one early and really put your name on a guy like a Keon Coleman, or on the defensive tackle side, like a Tavondre Sweat, or like a Johnny Newton, or a Chris Jenkins, if you weren't going to do that early, don't do it at all. Because in the wide receiver room, you have Christian Watson, Romeo Dobbs, Jaden Reed, and Dontavion Wicks. Behind them, you have Bo Melton and Malik Heath, and frankly, Grant Dubose. So what are the realistic odds of a 6th or 7th round pick in this year's draft beating out those guys? They're not high. Same thing in the defensive tackle group. After you got past the guys that I just talked about, you just spent a 4th round pick on Colby Wooden. What are the odds that you want to release Colby Wooden for whatever this guy would have been, whomever it would have been in the mid rounds? Now, you get like a potential really nice 4.31 tech nose and like a Christian Boyd late. Maybe you keep 6 defensive tackles. Maybe you, try to stash them obviously on the practice squad. Number of things, right? But outside of that, it didn't make sense to cut Colby Wooden for another mid-round pick. Either go get Johnny Newton, go get Chris Jenkins, go get Byron Murphy, go get Tavondre Sweat, or don't do it. And they ended up not doing either. And that brings us to NIU DT James Esther. We'll get you a RAS if we can. Didn't have one. He looked like a penetrating 3-tech to me. He didn't look like a nose body. I can get a quick height and weight probably on this kid. Owen Reese. I haven't watched a ton of this guy. Owen Reese shared a couple of clips. He looked short, squatty. Yeah, 6'3", 298. Short, squatty. Seemed like a guy who maybe had a chance to do some pass rushing. Maybe did some pass rushing in college. Let's see. 20 tackles for loss, 5-year guy, 9 sacks. Again, a 5-year guy. He's a full 5-year guy. He'll get thrown into competition. I don't like his odds. Sorry. Got to kind of be kind of quick in this episode. And I want to be truthful and honest. Because LVN can rush from inside. Gary, if needed, can rush from inside. Quay can blitz up the middle. Edrin Cooper can blitz up the middle. Carl Brooks was awesome as an interior rusher. Colby Wooden, they project as a good interior rusher. Devontae Wyatt ruins people. He just needs to figure out how to get guys on the ground. I don't like this kid's odds. ASU tight end Messiah Swinson. He's interesting. He's interesting because he is real big. And I know that sounds like really dumb. That sounds like really dumb analysis. But he is your attempt, if you are going to make one, at recreating the Mercedes Lewis of it all, at recreating the third tackle. It is a 6'8", 260-pound human being. Just a massive dude. Just a massive dude. And again, like I said, he's your, if you were ever going to try, because he has just such a bigger frame than Ben Sims. So if you were ever actually going to try to recreate what you had with Mercedes at 6'8", 260, Swinson would be the guy. Now, unfortunately, if you believe in them, the run blocking grades at Arizona State are not great. I'm going to see how often he was asked even to pass block. He's a good pass blocker. But he ran a route. So he stayed into pass block on 19% of Arizona State's snaps in 2022 and stayed into block on 35% of Arizona State snaps in 2023, meaning he's going out on a route. So this is a guy I think that they're just trying to get in their room, see if they can stash him on the practice squad, see if they can develop him into a big, nasty blocker, because he's not a big, nasty blocker right now. And honestly, if he was a big, nasty blocker, he probably would have gotten drafted because this group of tight ends stunk. And so if he was good at that, and that could have kind of been his calling card in this group of tight ends, he probably would have gotten drafted. Okay. Next guy, Ohio defensive tackle, Rodney Matthews. Again, another shot at the D tackle room after not addressing it at all in the draft. I'm not currently seeing a relative athletic score for Rodney Matthews. I would guess that he's maybe not a maybe not a real big time draft prospect, which does happen. 6'2", 310. If that's real and they're not lying about his size, that could be a one tech option. Somebody to look at, certainly not as a zero tech nose, but as a one tech nose. Worth a look, I would say. But I do not know much about the Rodney Matthews. Taking a quick look here, just at some PFF. Definitely a run defender because he's not doing much in the pass rush game at all. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe he's a 4-3 nose tackle body that they're just kind of checking out. Next guy, and this one I do know something about, and that is Wisconsin long snapper Peter Bowden. I've already got Peter in my 53-man roster projection. They are a team that struggled at long snapper. Orzik did not play particularly well. Many folks have referred to Bowden as the number one long snapper in the draft. Didn't get drafted, obviously, but the number one long snapper in the draft. I'm not grinding long snapper tape. That's not what I do. But I'm willing to believe that the number one long snapper in the draft is better than what they had last year. Does it help that he's a local kid? Yeah, that's cool, right? You always, if you can get a badge around the Packers, that's very cool. But they have a real need at long snapper, and so being able to get Peter Bowden is cool because that's an important thing. The operation was not good last year. I'm not making excuses for Anders Carlson. The operation was not good last year. So to me, it is important to clean up as much of that as you can. And look, have the Anders Carlson versus Greg Joseph, face off to the death. I got no problem with that. But improving the operation is key. And I think Peter Bowden's going to win that job. That's just my opinion. The next one's interesting. Washington linebacker Raylan Goforth. I watched a ton of Washington. And I mean, it's a UDFA thing, so I just don't know. USC transfer, part-time player, because I watched a ton of Washington. They got one linebacker whose first name starts with an E, whose name is extremely hard to say. Watched a ton of him. Watched a ton of Trice. Obviously watched a ton of the Washington offense. Watched a ton of the Zion something guy, the edge, right? And this guy was a part-time player. Goforth was a part-time player. As far as, I wonder if there's a RAS out there for him. There is. Okay, well, there you go. There's your answer. That's why they like him, because he can run and hit. That's the buzzword, right? Turns out Washington lied about his size, just a shade over 6'1", shade under 230, but runs a 4.62 and shuttles at 4.21. This is a special teams option, like dime linebacker, Joe Thomas type. Just real quick look. Did not have particularly good PFF grades. I did not even view him as like a draftable guy because he was getting part-time work at Washington, and he's now a fifth-year guy because he played 4 seasons at USC. Also, without particularly good grades from a PFF standpoint. I have no notes on Raylan Goforth, and there's not really an easily accessible to my knowledge. I can quick look. I would guess that there's not an easily accessible. Okay. Well, there is. I'll read this one. That's fine. Athletically inclined and hard-hitting linebacker. Goforth has a ton of pop in his hits. Run and hit. They've been talking about this all the time. Excellent lower body explosion. Excels as a blitzer. Negatives look like stiff in the hips, which you can kind of see from his testing. Needs to loosen his hips in order to fully unlock his range as a linebacker. Could improve his processing. He's a Mike linebacker who can stop the run, not at that size. Solid hands, which is good. And again, more talk about his stiffness as an athlete. That is one thing I'll say about this whole class is they got a lot of linear athletes. For a team that loves the short shuttle as much as they do, they got a lot of guys that kind of go forward and backward, and that's about it. Which, whatever. Whatever. Okay. Elkhorn State running back Jarvion Howard. Again, uphill battle. Okay, very uphill battle. If I can get an athletic profile for him, I will share it with you. I think the forgotten man in all of this. So poor agility, explosive athlete, very much built like the rest of their guys in that he's 5'9" and some change, 215, ran a 4.53 40. Very poor agilities, very high explosives. That's his athletic profile. The forgotten man in this whole running back thing is how much everybody seems to think they like Emmanuel Wilson, and nobody's even talking about Emmanuel Wilson. So if they like Emmanuel Wilson as much as we think they do, and there's maybe even a chance that they keep 4 backs, the fourth one is going to be Emmanuel Wilson, and they're going to maybe potentially try to sneak him onto like the practice squad. Who knows if that'll work or not? I just think that they're not going to keep more than 4 running backs. I think they're going to keep 3 because of what Jaden Reed can do sort of with, taking handoffs, because of what Christian Watson can do taking handoffs. I think you could do some of that stuff with Bo Melton. I think you can do some of that stuff with Keyshawn Nixon. I don't think they're keeping a 4th running back around. But if they are, I think it's Emmanuel Wilson. So I think a very uphill climb for Jarvion, for Jarvion Howard. And finally, Albany wide receiver Julian Hicks. Again, the Melton Heath, kind of Mendoza line. He's as Packersy as it gets, folks. Elite 3-cone at 6.77, 6 and some change, over 200 pounds. Elite broad jump, elite 10-yard split, and 20-yard split. His overall 40 time was just okay at 4.53. But he's another dense, big-ish. I mean, he's going to look like just like most of the rest of the guys. He's not going to look like Christian because he's not 6'5", but he's going to look like Dontavion. He's going to look like Romeo. He's going to look like Heath and Dubose. I mean, he is a Packers wide receiver through and through. And again, he's probably hoping to get to the practice squad because Toure even is technically still there. So are you Julian Hicks at a 9.18 RAS, Packersy as Packers gets, from Albany? Are you going to beat out Toure so that you can beat out Dubose, so that you can beat out Heath, so that you can beat out Melton? I don't know about that. But he is a very intriguing prospect from a 92nd percentile athlete perspective, basically. One thing I'll take a quick look at because it's important to me and it's generally important to them, especially at the FCS level. Now, Christian, we always talk about as kind of the exception just because of how unbelievably much North Dakota State ran the football. Okay, 820 yards last year. It's all right. 319 yards the year before, but he's an undrafted free agent. You would like to see a guy. He's a Central Michigan and then transfer portal kid to Akron, and then he was a drop down from the FBS to the FCS. You'd like to see more production from a player like that, but it's an undrafted free agent, basically flyer, and it's probably honestly based on just how perfectly he sort of slides into what they do, how perfectly he sort of slides into their type. Good 3-cone, reasonably productive, taller than 6 feet, heavier than 190. Heavier than, what was he? He might have been heavier than 200. Yeah, heavier than 200. He's just another one of their types that they like to put in the building. Okay, that'll wrap it up for today's show. Only the sickos probably came in for the UDFA show. I think Donovan Jennings has a really good chance to make the club, and I think that the long snapper is going to make the club. Those are the 2 out of the 9. And again, there's probably some guys getting cut, or maybe some of these guys are. One of these guys is just a tryout and was misreported as an undrafted free agent. But it's a small group. That's what happens when you have kind of a heavy roster and you make 11 picks. And by the way, I think 20 of Green Bay's 22 draft picks from the last 2 years are still on the team, or some unbelievable percentage like that. Anyway, check us out over at Packer Report. You get a chance. Check me out. I'm at Ross Uglem on X, formerly known as Twitter. Do everything you're supposed to do here at the Daily Draft. And also here at the Pack a Day Podcast YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, click the bell, get the notifications so that you can get all the Packers content that you require on a daily basis. Have a great rest of your day, and go Pack Go.